Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Dailies on Network Television, the winning station where we keep you updated with the happenings from the Nigerian newspaper. I am Sana Elisha Dasham. Remember to drop your comments and your views on Facebook and on YouTube. I'll be doing the program alongside Rachel Tansy. Good morning.
Good morning, Sana.
All right, and we shall move straight into the papers, starting with the Vanguard newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, the big story hardship will handle planned protests as family matter. Statement coming from the federal government. The writer says pleads with Nigerians to give it more time. Southeast governors warn against nationwide protests. We can't withdraw from protests we didn't organize. A statement coming from Labour tells federal government states to listen to cries of Nigerians, warns against use of brute force on protesters. Threats won't work, Falana tells Reps Minority Caucus is saying WC appeals against protest summons emergency meeting with state chairman. You can find all the details on page 5. Unsettled FX forwards may impact confidence in economy, analyst OPS 1. More details can be found on page 20. On terrorism, federal government resumed mass trial of over 300 suspects, report from ONSA. On hardship, stranded foreign scholars groan as federal government slashes allowances. Insecurity perpetrated by organized non-state actors, coming from President Tinubu. Still on the paper, Meta deletes 63,000 Nigerian accounts linked to sextortion scams. Dangote stop demarketing local industries, man cautions the federal government. As CSO's religious group demand probe of NNPC, you can find details on page 8, a column by Olufasan on page 16, and sports page 36, Paris 2024 Super Falcons confront Brazil today. And that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
And on Daily Independent, Fubara backs Independent newspaper Governor of the Year 2023 award, data found in the paper. Dangote refinery must not fail, Kwankwaso wants the federal government. Shareholders condemn demarketing, say it may discourage investors. You can start reading on the front page and continue in the paper. And the big news for the paper, tax on forex gain will deter foreign investors, bankers warn. Ask Senate to intervene, say it amount to double taxation. It will reduce investment, decrease liquidity, increase costs. Detail of this can be found in the paper. NLC asks the federal government, states to listen to worries of Nigerians, clarifies position on the planned nationwide protests. LP says NLC has been paid to destroy party. Insists INEC recognizes Abure and other party officials. LP says NLC has been paid to destroy the party, insists INEC recognizes Abure other party officials, detail found on page 7. Only constitutionally amendment can address protesters' demand, coming from APC, appeals to organizers to shelve their plans, protest ill time will overheat policy. This is coming from Ozodima. You can find that on page 29. And the Senate Chief Whip, Southern Borno Indigenous protest, sack of Indume. You can find that on page 6. Duty-free food imports will impoverish us, farmers tell federal government, says food importation risks destroying country's agriculture, and many other people have been saying. We also saw the president of African Development Bank saying the same. So you can read more detail in the paper. Coming from Lagos State Governor Sanwo-Olu, he's saying bring investment to Lagos, guarantee of returns assured. More detail on page 6. We can see here Tinubu assent to Southeast Development Commission Bill. Tinubu assent to Northwest Southeast Development Commission Bill. And we can see him exchanging some handshakes with some of the governors from the Southeast. And that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, Kaduna Assembly repeals Zaria Kafanchan Kaduna Authorities Law. Details can be found on page 18. NDLEA naps most wanted Lagos drug baron Temu. Custom exchange rate falls as Naira strengthens. On Olympics, Super Falcons tackle Brazil in dicey duel. Details can be found on page 32. 33 Nigerians receive American Varsity's $2.92 million scholarships. Ascent to Northwest Southeast Development Commission historic Ubasani, Barrow, and Kalu is saying it will speed up growth in our zone. A statement from Ohanize. You can start with the details on the front page. Plots to hijack protests unleash mayhem ticking. Coming from the federal government, the writer says counters out, says NLC, ADSC, Northern Collusion, tanker drivers allege infiltration. Plans to pay stipends to unemployed Varsity Polytechnic graduates on the way. Statement from Idris. You can start with the details on the front page. Women farmers seek inclusivity in FCT Agri Extension services. Tinubu's government has genuine measures in place. We have APGA Board of Trustee Chair Okori saying 33,000 victims of rape GBV gets increased assistance, that is gender-based violent victims. More details can be found on page 9. Federal government resumes mass trial of over 300 terrorism suspects. And that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which happens to be the Punch newspaper. Mayhem as Fubara Wike supporters clash in Rivers. Detail of that can be found on page 14. Dangote local refineries to end fuel importation. Federal government scholars decry 56% allowances cut, fear explosion, as we are seeing that some of the students said they haven't gotten any of the allowances for the past 8 months. So more detail can be found on that story on page 22. Governors, ministers meet today to stop hunger protests, where we're seeing yesterday there was an emergency meeting. Today again, we will be seeing another meeting. Reps ask the federal government to embrace dialogue as Tinubu sues for peace. And we have Abiodun Ozodinma Bauchi government condemned the planned rally. Oba of Benin urges patience. Here we see a picture story here. Pilot hospitalized as plane crash kills 18 in Nepal. Detail of that found on page 15. We hope something will be done about that. Just yesterday we saw that of the Ethiopian airline and another again. Detail of that can be found in the paper. Foreign education forex allocation tumbles 83% coming from CBN. Residents groan over Lagos Air Force Base blackout. And we're seeing Oyo plans fresh selection process for Allied Fair. Detail found on page 15 of the Punch newspaper, and that's all on the Punch.
On Voice of Liberty, new 70,000 naira minimum wage now applies to maid drivers and others. A statement from Senate President. Economic stimulus program, over 438 billion naira allocated to 34 states, the FCT. A statement from the federal government. In Kaduna, Governor Uba Sani applauds Tinubu's signing of Northwest Development Commission bill. The big story on the paper, why state of emergency is a must in Nigeria's broadcast industry. Coming from a Liberty TV panel, says Ariwa 24 TV unlicensed by NBC using Ariwa brand name to operate. You can find details inside the paper. We are not behind planned protests, coming from NLC. Student bodies, NAUS, NAPS, NANCES declare nationwide protest. Nigeria is rotting, citizens expecting miracle from Tinubu. Statement from Wike. Still on nationwide planned protests, give Tinubu more time. Northern, Southern elders appeal to youths. And that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
You know, I'm surprised coming from Wiki saying Nigeria is rotting, citizens expecting miracle from Tinubu. I think we have said that in our various discussion on the program and even not on the dailies, on other programs. The fact that, of course, nobody is expecting a turnaround suddenly on the economy because, of course, I clearly remember categorically, Rachel, before the 2023 election, on the dailies particularly, where I stated the fact that we've had analysts, we've had people that have said that, you know what, the rate at which Nigeria is, at the state it is presently, it will take the government, whichever government will be coming, more than 10 years to fix it. Now, maybe this is where Wike is coming from. I believe strongly this is what he's saying, that Nigeria is rotting and we shouldn't expect a miracle. But I believe that Nigerians are not asking for a miracle. Nigeria is asking for an effort coming from the government. And one thing the government is failing to understand is that the protest is not a protest on Tinubu. The protest is a protest on bad governance. The protest is a protest on even the way the military is operating. The protest is on so many things that are not functioning. Importation of food, where we have agriculture that we're neglecting, our refineries that are not functioning. This is a protest on all of this. So, for example, if we have the present government trying to, okay, let us pick the health sector, let us pick the educational sector and see what we can do to fix this to first. Maybe you save on your own time frame. We saw some of the agenda, his Renew Hope agenda, some of the key points that the president said he wants to focus on poverty, education, and many other things. Now, what is our poverty rate presently? We're going to look at it. How many people are still living in poverty? And I mentioned yesterday in one of our programs, Nigeria Now, and I said that if we want to look at the sustainable development goal that we are supposed to achieve by 2030, what is the present government doing? So is Nigeria rotting? Of course, but is it beyond repair? No. We can fix it. We have other countries that were worse than Nigeria. But they have, when you look at the countries, you'll be surprised. Was this a country like this before? So I'm believing, rather than coming from the minister, I'm hoping to hear more positive thoughts coming from him rather than Nigeria's rotting citizens expecting miracle from Tinubu. I really am not welcoming that statement coming from him.
This statement is very hypocritical coming from Wike, seeing the fact that he is one of the reasons now that one of the major states in the country is under chaos, and that's decay. You are talking and you are part of the decay. No offense, but yes, Wike currently is part of the decay in Nigeria because we have rivers in crisis. We know what that state does to the country, and it's in crisis, and you are part of the reason that it is in crisis. So when you talk about Nigeria being rotten, you're one of the reasons it's rotten at the moment. But we can move past that, right, and say, okay, you know what, there's one common sense that is very common, and that is everybody knows growth is gradual. If you've planted before, you know you won't wake up tomorrow and see a tree. Even if you try to force growth, it takes its own time. This is one sense that is common. Even if people decide to turn a face from it and be blind, growth takes time. It's a common sense that you can't deny it. Even if you try to deny it, it's a fact. You just have to be patient when it comes to growth. So yes, Nigerians have a common sense, knowing very well that there is no magic about growth. That is why we have been giving the government time. That is why we didn't go, the country didn't go on a protest 3 months after Tinubu's been in office. That's why the country didn't go on a protest immediately after certain policies were put in place. That was why time was given to see. Today, this policy has been given 6 months from now, a year later, what will it be? Because everybody understands time. Not as much as others do, but we all have an understanding of time, that no matter what you do, there's time. Even Yahoo boys know that there is time for everything. They know that these millions might not fall in their account immediately. They know that, okay, we have to do 14 days sacrifice. We have to do that. Everybody knows that there is time. So nobody is expecting a magic concerning Nigerians' economy. Even if you think so, I don't think Nigerians are that foolish to think that we are expecting a miracle from Tinubu. But what are we? Everybody knows that if you want to harvest maize in 3 months' time, for example, you plant it today. And that is the question, and that is the concern for Nigeria. What is the government planting now that we are going to reap in the future? We waited a whole year ever since certain policies to see how would it affect our economy. And we're seeing it draining us. And we are demanding that drastic measures should be taken concerning certain things, because by now we will keep saying it that our currency is supposed to be doing better. If you're floating it, and investors and exporters are the reason behind what our currency means, trade has been going on. So we should start seeing some favorable outcome in the window, but we are not seeing anything. If subsidy removal is the way forward, it's a whole year, how much have we saved? And what we've been saved been used to do? Where are we putting it? Where are we channeling it? What sector is struggling, and what sector do you plan to start with as an administration? Where are you going to put your focus on as a government and say, okay, this is going to be my focus for my first tenure. This is where I want to channel my, and let Nigerians start seeing the work. It's a year already and over. It's just a matter of time. 4 years will be gone. What are we going to see? What will be the dividend for your administration? We are not expecting a miracle. Nobody is wanting a magic. We just want to see what will be the outcome. What is the dividend of what the things that you have started over a year? Where are we heading towards as a country? And I believe that that's where every Nigerian stand down, but nobody is expecting us to just grow 100 years in one day. Nobody's expecting that.
Well, let's just cross our fingers and see how this whole stuff will go on. Let's continue looking at the paper review, and I think the next paper is the Guardian newspaper. And I think I can find my paper. Richard, if you can help me with the Guardian newspaper.
All right. On the Guardian newspaper, tough times for poor Nigerians as food inflation worsens malnutrition. The writer says 100 other 5 children die every hour. 2 million suffer acute malnutrition. Nigeria loses $1.5 billion of its GDP to malnutrition yearly. UNICEF urges the federal government to introduce food subsidy, reduce taxes. Federal government stakeholders propose $60 million to tackle malnutrition. You can find details on page 6. NDLEA naps Lagos drug baron after years of evading arrest. Dangote refinery may accelerate closure of Europe's existing 90 refineries. Complaints against corrupt public officials up by 29%. We have Meta deletes 63,000 Facebook accounts over extortion scams. Federal government resume mass trial of terrorism suspects. OPS falls fresh NPR hike foresees shutdown of more businesses. NANS kick as federal government slashes allowances of scholars abroad. Planned protest, SGF meets Tinubu's cabinet as APC holds emergency meeting. And that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
Sure, did you notice the reverse? While UNICEF is urging federal government to introduce food subsidy and reduce tax, IMF is telling the FCT to please add more tax for Nigerians. I mean, I'm seeing two different things. While we're having another one being people friendly, another one seems to be anti-people policy. But I really think maybe that is the way forward. I remember one of the papers where we saw one of the vice president for Diabetes Association
of Nigeria,
where she stated the fact that the president should use the taxes gotten from some of
sugar, from I think something from beverages, because there were taxes put on them.
Put on it. And I think it's really linked to what we said earlier, the fact that we see tax being put on certain things, but it's not being used for that thing eventually. So you just can't help but ask certain questions. But I hope that the government will take all of these advices. But I think yesterday as well, we saw one of the papers where they're saying that the reason why Nigeria is going down is because the federal government have been listening to IMF, giving us certain advices that are not favorable to us as it is. But we'll just keep our fingers and hope that the government is smart enough to pick the right advice that will actually help the country to grow better.
Sally, as it is now, yes, the government have been listening to the IMF, and then it have not been favorable to us. We also saw on one of the papers where farmers are saying if the government should allow importation and duty-free or tax-free, it's going to impoverish farmers. But I don't think that is true. because there is a way that the government can control the market that everybody stands to gain. When it's duty free or tax free, doesn't mean it doesn't have a price attached to it. The government is supposed to have control. There's supposed to be price ceilings. We do not have that in this country. We are very careless regarding certain very, very simple policies that could help the life of Nigerians, most especially when it comes to the standard of of our living, prices of goods and services in the market, and all of that. There's so much exploitation going on, and I believe that the government knows how to step in and make sure that farmers are not losing, marketers are not losing, but above all, consumers are also gaining and are able to have access to goods in the market, to food and all of that. I don't think excise duty free goods or tax free products will crash any market. A matter of fact, we are in a position where the government needs to step in, and the best that could be done by the government right now is bringing in their own goods into the market to be able to crash down the prices of goods in the market. This is one very direct approach that would help us, that we'll be able to see a bag of rice going down from 85,000. We'll be able to see maize going down. This is what the government needs to do. But at the same time, we also have a government that is benefiting from the hike of things in the market. We also have a government that is selfish to a large extent, because there are people that are in government that are also running these businesses. So they want to control the narrative, because if you are a capitalist and you are also in government, these two things don't work hand in hand. True. But we find ourselves allowing certain things to happen, and automatically these people control the narrative that is not favorable to Nigerians, but only a few.
Honestly, because this breakdown really breaks my heart. About 100 under 5 children die every hour, 2 million suffer acute malnutrition, and that is what I'm talking about, eradicating of poverty and hunger, which is part of the SDG goal. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that all of this will be tackled. Well, before we continue further with the paper review, we'd love to take a break. We've said quite a lot. We're seeing another meeting today concerning the protest. As well, we're seeing students schooling abroad are actually suffering because their allowances have been cut down. So, and NAS is actually talking and saying the fact that please, the government need to do something, because some of the students are stranded and they are really going through a lot. So the government need to come in and provide some succor for them so that they will be able to live above waters there. We have other stories on the paper, so we would love you to go through it, and when we come back, we will continue with the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper where we think the federal government pleading with Nigerians to shelf strike, or actually the protest that is meant to happen, because they said they are working on modalities to make sure that things will get better. As well as we're seeing other stories on the paper, another plane crash again in Nepal, which is on the international scene. So we would love you to go through other stories, whichever is of interest to you. Drop your comment, your views on them. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, we will continue with the paper review, and Rachel will take us through the other paper again we'll be taking.
On Nigerian Tribune, Dangote Refinery man shareholders warn against the marketing of local industries. Makinde sets 18-month timeline for upgrade of Ibadan Airport. The big story on the paper, man LCCI falls 26.75% interest rate. It will further constrain manufacturing growth. We are concerned about implications on business and economy. Statement from LCII. NDLEA arrests most wanted Lagos drug baron Temo. Navy uncovers illegal bunkering site in private residence. Ocean government calls for calm on communal clash in Aida Ade LG. 420,000 die from consumption of unsafe food yearly. More details can be found on page 24. More groups condemn planned nationwide protest. We have SGF, NSA ministers hold emergency meeting, plead with Nigerians. NANS condemns protest organizers for hiding identity. We can't withdraw from protests. We didn't organize. A statement from NLC. Oba of Benin calls on federal government to expedite action on economic policies. Arewa Youth Assembly, Amadu Bello Foundation call for dialogue. Bauchi to shut PHCs to protect lives of staff and patients. You can find all details on page 11, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On Business Day newspaper, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of business. Dangote is seen disrupting 90 European refineries. And as well, still on the paper, federal government moves to avert the plan #bad governance protests. Federal government moves to avert the plan #bad governance protests. Tomatoes, pepper costs push pot of jollof rice to 20,274 naira. More detail found in the paper. Lagos Eye Electric powered ferries from 410 million Europe World Bank back project targets $150 million Central Food Hub to reduce waste by 50%. Seek $26 million to establish Advanced Cancer and Diagnostic Institute. More detail found in the paper. Naira will slow solar battery adoption as price drops to 85%. More detail found in the paper. We have a picture story as well on the front page. Do well to get the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Leadership newspaper at 6:1, Mahi remains development jinx breaker. Statement from his aide. Governors meet on 70,000 naira minimum wage and local government autonomy. We have trending Lagos police warn against covering plate numbers. On numbers, CBN rejects $10 million into Forex market. CBN ejects $105 million into Forex market. You can find details of both trend and numbers on page 2. Agri mechanization, federal government plans to produce 5,000 tractors annually. Stakeholders asked Tinubu to review Katsina road project cancellation. The big story, 8 days to go, opposition swells against hardship protests. Will not tolerate lawlessness, federal government warns. Rally potentially dangerous, says governors. Southern leaders caution planners. 60 reps ask Tinubu to dialogue with youth. No going back, students declare. Details can be found on page 4. 5 northern states account for 70% polio variant in Nigeria, a report from UNICEF. Trump shooters search details of Kennedy assassination, a report from the FBI. On oil theft, NUPRC kickstarts $21 million metering audit. On economic crunch, Federal government slashes foreign scholars' allowances, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Nation newspaper. Most wanted Lagos drug baron nabbed after gun duel. Detail found on page 6. Southeast Development Commission excite Ohaneze and governors. Ibadan airport upgrade for completion in 18 months. Triad of 300 I take that again. Triad of 300 terrorism rather suspect resume. Triad of 300 terrorism suspects resume. Data found on page 6. Labour Party accuses its elected members of being behind the crisis. You can read detail of that on page 3. Coming from the Finance Minister Edu, he's saying 2024 budget will be fully implemented. And the big story on the paper, August's first planned protest similar to hashtag NSAS, governors warn, don't overheat the polity. Oba of Bini gives the government more time. Sanwo-Olu seek more investment in IT, healthcare and transportation. Downside of the paper, livestock reform panel report on farmer herders conflict ready in 2 weeks. Livestock reform panel report on farmer herder conflict ready in 2 weeks. Detail found on page 5. And we have 2 picture stories on the front page of the paper, where we're seeing Evergreen Comes Alive, which is the first picture story up, and then downside is about worrying investors. This is where we're seeing the governor of Lagos State and the investors, and that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Nigeria versus Brazil. First time lucky, a question. The writer says Falcons' first win against Seleco in Group C opener. We're ready for any opponent, says Uchebe. You can find details on page 7. PSG confirms Uchegini for Usitor. Osimhen open to Saudi move. This is a report. Morocco shock Argentina amid violence. Celine Dion to earn $2 million for one song, I believe, in the opening of the Olympics. Gulf youngest ever USA flag bearer. More details can be found on page 2. Monaco signed Nigerian team for €6 million. No rift among Chelsea players. Arsenal set £35 million world prize. United fill with delight bids. We have a Desanya warned of Edwards' threat. Nigerian men must step up in Paris, a statement from CAFO. In Paris 2024, Canada coach analyst out over drone controversy. And that's all the news on Point Sport Extra.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Times newspaper. And there on the Daily Times, we're having the big story here, planned protest. Federal government pleads for more time, with the writer saying all issues will be resolved in a way to ensure peace and stability. And we have NLC clarifies position on the looming protest, says it's not part of organizers. Still on the Daily Times newspaper, prioritizing youth's interest to advance migration governance, IOM urges the federal government. Reps squeeze minister over infrastructure decay, safety standards at airport. NG cares federal government releases over 438 billion naira to 34 states and the FCT. Federal government resumed mass trial of terrorism suspects, detail found in the paper as well. Tinubu signed Southeast Northwest Development Commission establish bills, with the writer welcomes Iyam, former Senate President, into APC. Ohaneze Indibo Youth Body hails Tinubu for the SEDC Act. And we have NIMED achieves IOC 9001 2015 certification for aeronautic meteorological service at Enugu Airport. NIMED achieves ISO 9001 2015 certification for aeronautic meteorological services at Enugu Airport. Detail found on page 4, and that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On First News newspaper, Abacha's family battle Tinubu Wike over Abuja property revocation in appeal court. The big story: and bad governance. Information Minister Tinubu, not opponent of protest but of violence, says federal government cautious because national protest risks spiraling into chaos. Meta cracks down on Yahoo Boys, 63,000 accounts deleted in fraud sweep. Ohenize hails Tinubu for signing Southeast Development Commission into law. At the downside of the paper, we have nationwide protest, monitor your children, APC tells parent. Most of the stories are not clear on the paper, and that will be all on First News newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at another paper, which is the New Telegraph newspaper. And this is a report where we see CBN FX sales plunge 60.29% to $6.95 billion year on year. You can read detail of that in the paper. And then coming from Moody's, windfall tax on FX gains will hurt Nigerian banks' profits. Detail found on page 25. Abacha family drags Tinubu Wiki and others to appeal court over Abuja property. Ojikaru is most reliable businessman I've ever met, coming from Apostle Aluze. You can find that on page 2. NDLEA naps most wanted Lagos drug baron Timo after years of evading arrests. Reps kick against FCT park and pay policy, demand details of the concession. Detail found on page 5. And the high cost of living, public health crisis loom as Nigerians resort to food rationing. Many families survive on a meal per day. And then coming from Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, they say 148.7 million Nigerians living in multi-dimensional poverty. Common man can't afford critical drugs for healthy living. This is coming from doctors. More detail found on page 3. NLC leaders working with APC to destroy our party, coming from Labour Party, accuses Congress of breaching the Trade Union Act. Federal government resumes trial of over 300 terrorism suspects. Detail found on page 4. Defection: Tinubu formally receives IM into APC. Local government autonomy: Governor Smith explore options. And on the planned protest, federal government appeals for calm, pleads for time, says it's not against protests but fear hijack. Dialogue with potential protesters rips minority caucus, tells the federal government, as APC want parents to monitor words and children's movement. Tinubu asserts to the Southeast Northwest Development Commission bill, and here we are having Abbas, Uba, Northern senators and others hail the president's action. We have a study that says twice yearly shot successful at preventing HIV infection. Twice yearly shot successful at preventing HIV infection. You can find that on page 26, and that's all the New Telegraph newspaper.
On this day newspaper, Man LCC Islandman continues hike in monetary policy rate by CBN. Moody's says 1/3 of 3.5 trillion naira pre-tax profits of 8 banks come from currency revaluation. You can find details on the front page. Companies may lose 2.4 trillion naira as concerns mount over unsettled FX forwards. Concoso to federal government: Dangote refinery must not be allowed to fail. Sanwo-Olu to investors: bring your business to Lagos for guaranteed returns. State's GDP rises to 41 trillion naira in 5 years. The big story on the paper: federal government won't plant nationwide protests may lead to anarchy. And we have Italian oil giant Eni confirms NUPRC's approval of deal with Owando. You can find details on page 31. We have a picture story aimed at the villa where we can see him with the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
Well, that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for the
You're welcome, Sarah.
Thank you to our viewers, supporters, and every other person who made the program a success. Do have a wonderful day again. Bye.